Over the last 3 years, Joel has been a regular season MVP caliber player who has broken scoring records but has failed to see the same postseason dominance. From 2020 to 23, Joel has led this league in scoring twice and has averaged 31 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists on good efficiency, shooting 55% on twos, 36% from deep, and 84% at the line, or 61% true shooting. But these numbers take a noticeable dip when the postseason rolls around. Yes, Joel is often hurt during his postseason runs in one way or another, but if you're always hurt, then that is something that you have to factor in, and you can't just put an asterisk on all of his numbers and say that isn't reflective of his play when that is all we've seen over his career. In the playoffs, in the same stretch, Joel's scoring falls 6 points to 25 points a game. He grabs 10 rebounds and 3 assists. He has an assist to turnover ratio of about 1-to-1, and his shooting splits look noticeably worse, only shooting 53% on twos, 27% from deep, and 85% at the line, or 57% true shooting, a 4 percentage drop. A player who Embiid reminds me of is Patrick Ewing. Ewing was able to lead his Knicks to the postseason 13 out of his 15 seasons with the team, but was unable to get it done, falling short time and time again due to his team, but also his own shortcomings as an offensive player, much like Embiid in my opinion, who's had good teams. Yes, some people have not shown up, Ben Simmons, James Harden, but his own play, especially his own offensive game, has also failed to get it done in the postseason, and is a big part of why the Sixers have failed to make it past the second round. From 1990 to 92, Ewing's scoring peak, he averaged 26 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 assists, shooting 53% on 2 and 75% at the line. Good for 57% true shooting. You gotta understand this is like a different era, or not better, but very comparable to Embiid's number relative to the era. Ewing did not take any threes over this stretch as well. Over the same run in the postseason, Ewing put up 24 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 assists. Not the biggest step back when you're looking at raw scoring numbers, but Ewing, much like Embiid, shooting really took a hit in the playoffs, going from 53% on twos to 48 and 78% at the line, a slight increase, or 53% true shooting, a 4 percentage drop, just like Embiid, who falls from 61% to 57%. What do these two guys have in common that I believe leads to their fall in the postseason? Firstly, both these guys are poor offensive rebounders, never really being able to generate easy points off a putback or getting their team an extra possession off of a crucial offensive board. Look at guys like Shaq and Jokic, contemporaries to Embiid, not so much Ewing with the Shaq, but they had a slight overlap. Both of these guys increased their scoring numbers from their regular season output. One of the key ways they were able to do this is by getting more putbacks and controlling the offensive glass at a higher rate. Shaq went from 28 points in the regular season and grabbing 11% of the offensive rebounds to 30 points in the playoffs and grabbing 13% of the offensive rebounds. Likewise, Jokic has gone from 26 points and 9% of the offensive rebounds to 30 points and 11% of the offensive rebounds. Yes, it might not seem like the biggest difference, only 2%, but that is pretty much one more putback or one more possession for your team to score. And in the postseason, where possessions matter more, that is so much more valuable and such a key component for dominating bigs to have. Guys like Embiid and Ewing both lack those skills, and it's a big part of their shortcomings in the postseason. But the lack of offensive rebounding only explains part of the problem with Embiid's style of play. The second key part to me is his playmaking and decision making. Yes, he has gone better as a post passer and reacting to doubles, but come the playoffs where he is facing better and more locked in defenses, teams are able to exploit his overall weak playmaking skills. Teams are able to make him rush, beat him up, and overall get him stressed and pressured in those spots, leading to more turnovers. It is a massive weakness of Embiid's games, and teams like the Boston Celtics took great advantage of it in this postseason. Against the swarming defenses of the Nets and Celtics, Embiid looked confused and rushed often. This led to a lot of turnovers and easy transition points for his opponents, as Embiid struggles in transition defense even in the postseason where he ramps up his overall defense. Embiid ended the the playoffs with a negative assist to turnover ratio, a very poor showing from an MVP caliber player. This problem has shown up in each of his last 3 playoff series where he's been eliminated. In the 2020 series against the Heat, he had his same negative assist to turnover ratio of 3 turnovers and 2 assists. In 2021 against the Hawks, he had 5 turnovers to 4 assists. It doesn't show up as much in the regular season, but against top 10 defenses, he almost has a 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. And this is a problem that constantly shows up in the playoff. Joel tends to struggle going up against top 10 defenses in the regular season, which helps explains his drop-off in the playoffs where he's going against these teams more often. In 20 games against top 10 defenses this season, Joel Embiid scored 31 points on +1 true shooting, or 58% true shooting, down 2 points and 6% shooting from his regular season averages. In 22 games during the 21 and 22 season, Embiid scored 28 points on +1 once again, down 2 points and 4% shooting. These are still really good numbers, of course. These are still all-star, all-NBA numbers, but there are a clear step back from his MVP pure dominance that you're used to seeing against other teams. In 42 games against top 10 defenses in the last 2 seasons, Embiid has put up just 30 points on 59% true shooting, down from his regular season averages over that same stretch of 32 points on 64% true shooting. Not the biggest drop, but a clear indication that Embiid struggles going against tougher defenses, and when teams have more time in the playoffs to lock in on your weaknesses, it is something that's easier to exploit, which is something that Embiid constantly suffers with. One part of Embiid's game that doesn't get really brought up when you're talking about his falling short in the playoffs is his reliance on free throw shooting. Yes, people will say you don't get as many calls in the playoffs or there is more physicality. While this is true, Embiid's free throw numbers aren't really affected at all. He has the same free throw rate in the regular season and the postseason over the last 3 years of 58%. Just for a reference, Jokic over that same stretch is below 40%. And his free throws made up the same percentage of his points comparatively to his regular season and postseason run over the same stretch. So Joel gets a very similar whistle that he does in the regular season and the playoffs, very different comparatively to many players who often don't get as many easy calls. But despite these quote-unquote soft calls that Embiid still gets in the playoffs, his impact is nowhere near as valuable, which indicates to me that the free throw aspect of his game doesn't truly have that much of an impact on winning basketball at the highest level, which is something that is very common among players who are very reliant on free throws to get their points, a la James Harden, who often struggles to show up in the playoffs due to his reliance on free throws. I know a question people will bring up is Joel Embiid just always hurt in the postseason? That's why his numbers fall off. And yes, Joel Embiid is always hurt in the postseason, which would explain a little bit of why his numbers fall off. But I think, like I've laid out before, the lack of playmaking, the lack of offensive rebounding are major indications of it. And lastly, Joel Embiid plays like a 2008, 2014 type of wing, where he makes a lot of his living in the mid-range. And while he's very effective at those shots and opportunities, they're still bad shots. And they're still tough shots to make, especially in the postseason when you're going up against better defenders. One of the kind of most surprising things about Embiid's game is the lack of shots he takes at the rim. Over the last 3 years of his MVP run, only 23% of his shots have come from 0 to 3 feet, and only a total of 44% of his shots have come from 0 to 10 feet. Not a lot of shots, especially when you're thinking of a guy like Embiid who's supposed to be a dominant big. This shot profile looks a lot more like a Kobe or a Melo, who respectively took 22% and 24% of their shots from 0 to 3 feet away in their best 3-year run. Compare Joel Embiid's shot profile to other bigs today like Jokic and Giannis, who both take a lot more shots at the basket. It's kind of understandable why he struggles so much to score in the postseason comparatively to these guys. Jokic takes 27% of his shots from 0 to 3 feet away and 55% of his shots from 0 to 10. Anthony Davis takes 33% of his shots from 0 to 3 feet, 58% of his shots from 0 to 10 feet. These guys are just generating easier and better percentage shots for themselves, and doing this allows them to score more efficiently against tougher defenses. The lack of rim attempts by Embiid to me is very confusing. He should be a very dominant low post scorer who's able to completely establish himself on the interior and impose his will on all types of defenders. But when you look at the numbers, it just doesn't really add up. Melo from 2012-2014 is taking more shots at the rim than Embiid does, or at least a higher percentage of his shots at the rim. And yes, you could blame his teammates for not being able to feed him the ball in the post often, but if you watch Embiid, he tends to just let guys push him away from the basket or post up for 2-3 seconds and then just kind of gives up. And so when he does this, he's getting pushed more and more away from the basket, leading him to post up around the free throw line, which makes it easier for opponents to double him and just is a harder shot to make than a 2-foot hook if he was really battling for position down low. This lack of shots against the rim, lack of easy opportunities off putbacks, and lack of easy opportunity for teammates off of his playmaking is what leads to a solid fall off for Embiid in the postseason. But the last thing that I truly think holds Embiid back from comparing to guys like Jokic and Giannis is his conditioning. In the postseason, Joel Embiid ramps up his defensive value a lot and becomes a much better rim protector. But by doing this, he depletes his gas tank more and more, and very often he looks very gassed by midway through the fourth or by the end of the fourth. And I don't blame him. He does have to carry such a hard load on both ends, but this is something that all-star players have to do, and in the playoffs, you are expected to do this for your team. You're expected to play more minutes, you're expected to dominate on both ends, and Joel Embiid simply just does not seem to have the gas tank to do that. Over the last 3 seasons, Joel Embiid has played 176 non-overtime regular season games. In just 13 of those, he's played over 38 minutes, or just 7%. Over that same stretch in the playoffs, Joel has played 30 games. In 14 of those, he's played over 38 or more minutes, or 46% of the games. I understand you want to load manage, and you should load manage Embiid during the regular season, but you can't expect a guy who plays 33 minutes a night all of a sudden to be able to ramp it up to 38 and be able to dominate on both ends. He just doesn't have the body, he doesn't have the gas tank, he doesn't have the stamina for that. Compare that to guys like Jokic or Giannis, who both have averaged 38 minutes or more in playoff runs. That is really where you start to see the difference between them. Both guys ramp up their minutes productions in the playoffs, where Joel struggles to play more minutes and be as efficient as he is in the regular season. Joel Embiid is a top 8 player and will continue to be in MVP talks and all NBA first team discussions, as he should, but unless he can fix the problems that I outlined that I truly think plague him and hinder his ability to score in the playoffs, he will never be able to sniff past the second round and will go down as one of the biggest disappointments in NBA history when it comes to playoff production.